on here. So everyone, this is Glenn. Maybe you've heard him be on Always Marco he is an anti-MLM advocate. His dad has been in Amway for some time, and he's going to just talk about that and other things as well. We'll just see where this conversation goes. So Glenn, it's all yours. Introduce yourself, whatever you want to talk about.
Yes, it's great to be here. I actually interviewed Scott about you on Friday.
Is that right? Yeah, you'd sent me. So how did that go?
Yeah, you've got some work to do to win Scott over. I hate to say. So. Yeah, so you've got a few fans, but unfortunately, Scott's not one of them just yet.
What do I need to do to earn Scott's respect? What do you think? What is your advice?
I think you need to just be educated by him. I think that was his message. That you need to listen and be educated, and he'll set you straight.
About Amway and the tool scam?
Yeah. But I tried to explain to him that you actually are aware of the Amway tool scam. You're not in denial about there being an Amway tool scam.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit confused. But it's a pity, though, because Scott is very, very knowledgeable on the Amway tool scam. I can't... Him and Seen Munger probably have the most knowledge on the Amway tool scam. Having said that, Seen Munger has only looked at the Amway tool scam. He's not an anti-MLMer. He's a historian, so... But yeah, that was interesting. And he wants you to come on to Building Fortunes Radio.
Is that right?
Yep.
Why?
I think he wants to set you straight and point out all the errors on the show.
So are we going to do that then?
Yeah, I'm very keen. Yeah, me, you, Peter Mingles, and Scott Johnson, all on the one show.
Well, let's do it. Let's set it up.
And the other one too is Seen Munger. He's keen to do an interview with you too.
Yeah, I'd like to talk with him just because he's done so much research on multi-level marketing, and he's got a different perspective on things. I don't know if when I was chatting with you about the origin of vision boards, but he was talking about iconography, or I can't even say the word, whatever it is. But it's like, I didn't know that the origin of vision boards goes back just like a ridiculous amount of time. So many things that I did when I was in multi-level marketing, I just thought were pretty much like modern inventions, and they're not. They're rooted in this past. And it's important to know that as people start waking up and exiting and wanting to figure out what happened with them. So yeah, I would love to,
That's very true. All the big MLM gurus, they're all just copying things that Dexter Yeager was doing, 20, 30, 40, literally 50 years ago. It's word for word Dexter Yeager.
It is. And I didn't know, sorry, what's that?
Yeah, sorry. Bill Britt, Dexter Yeager, these sort of guys, these modern gurus they're literally copying word for word, regurgitating the same stuff that, these MLM masters were doing, decades ago. It's nothing new. It's just the same old thing. The problem is that the younger people, they think that these are all new ideas, and they're not. That's why I think it's so important to show the young people, hey, this isn't new, guys. This is very old. This is very outdated. This is because the younger people, I've got no doubt, there's a lot of 18 to 24-year-olds who think they're doing something really, really new and really radical and different, but it's not. It's old and it's very, very outdated.
Yep. All of these concepts are now taken over with motivational speakers and life coaches. They're taking over these same things. And a lot of them overlap into multi-level marketing, and all of it, it's like you're manifesting your reality.
Yeah, it's actually one thing Scott says that's spot on is it's a case of who gets to the 18-year-old first. Is it going to be us? If we get to them first, they're not going to join. They're going to know that MLM is fraud. But if one of these MLM recruiters gets to them first, then we're in trouble, because once you get someone into this thing, it's very, very hard to get them out.
Yes. Because and a lot of, like that Utah Attorney General that we did that live stream on last night, me and Marco, where it was just like the last few minutes of the live stream. But that Attorney General, Sean Reyes, he grew up in multi-level marketing, and
yes,
he thinks it's great. Even with all this other stuff going on, he still thinks that it's a great business model. He thinks it's a business model. He talked about how his family came from the Philippines, and that fleeing persecution. And that MLM is a great opportunity for people fleeing another country, fleeing persecution. And it's great for underpaid teachers too. It's because it's selling the American dream, and the American dream is actually business opportunities. So that's a great example. Like it got to him before he was born. It's like as a kid. Yeah.
I feel like with my dad, you could get the smartest, the best talker in the world to talk to him, to show him all the statistics and all the data, and they would have absolutely no effect, because he's been taught that anyone who isn't speaking positively about Amway is a negative person who is trying to steal his dream because they are jealous of him and they don't have the courage to do Amway. That is literally what he believes. And that is because he's listened to hours and hours and hours of tapes of people like Dexter Yeager repeating the same message, that it's us versus them. They're trying to steal your dream. Don't let them steal your dream. Actually, I was thinking yesterday about this. In the history of the world, I don't know if there's been a single person who has brainwashed more people than Dexter Yeager, because Dexter Yeager has literally brainwashed millions of people, and not just the people that he's personally brainwashed. There's now other people copying his same tricks, brainwashing more people.
Exactly. Everybody in different multi-level marketing companies, various uplines, various CEOs that actually start these companies, and then multi-level marketing coaches, and then also life coaches as well, that are like not even affiliated with MLM, but they use the same techniques, and he's had a really huge impact on people. Negative.
I think one thing that's interesting here in Australia compared to America and Canada is MLM's actually taught in schools. I was talking to a 16-year-old, and he said, MLM, your dad's in MLM. And I'm like, how do you know about that? And he's like, oh, they taught us about that in school. Over 99% of people lose money.
They teach it in Australia?
Yeah, well, apparently so. This 16-year-old told me that it was taught in schools, and he was just in disbelief that, my dad used to be a bank manager, so he was in disbelief that a bank manager would join something with a 99 point something % loss rate. And I think that's why Amway was so keen to get Betsy DeVos into the parliament in the USA and make her the person in charge of education, because that, as long as she's there, no one's allowed to talk about MLMs and their 99% loss rate.
And now they're going to be having this day on the Hill or whatever, like this direct selling association gets to go up to Capitol Hill, and they get to meet with various politicians, purchase political favors, and try to get them to close the loophole on the business opportunity rule.
Oh, to me, this is the greatest political fix of all time. I mean, I challenge anyone to find me a greater political fix. These companies have donated millions of dollars to every single side of politics, and it has worked. It works. I mean, it's just amazing. You've got a business with a 99 point something % loss rate, millions of victims, and they've got the entire parliaments, and not just in America, but all over the world on side. I think it's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. They even have it. I came across this document from 2018, and the DSA branch in Canada, they have this list of like who they're going to try to reach out to, and they wanted to try to reach out to. I'm going to have to get that document again, because I'm going to make some content on this about something about like education. This is in Canada, and they're like, we could rally, like you could get teachers to give testimonials.
Yep.
Then we could introduce this program into the schools. That's the DSA Canada's trying to get this into the schools, to teach not about multi-level marketing, like that it's the loss rate, but to teach it as a viable business, to teach it as an option for kids.
If you were to make a movie about this, it would be too far-fetched. The idea that a company could literally pay off every single political party, not just one side of politics, the left side of politics, the right side of politics, the center of politics, and not just in one country, but in multiple countries. Yep. And that millions of people could be brainwashed and lose money as a result, and almost nobody would talk about it. I mean, it's just too far-fetched. That script would never get through. They'd say, no, that's too far-fetched. That's crazy conspiracy theory stuff, but it's reality.
Yeah, it feels like that for me, even when I'm talking about it and I'm explaining that these are cults. and that how, but, and people will, I'll hear myself and I'll even feel it. People that will argue with you that they're not losing money, they're actually investing in themselves. And I was one of those people.
Yeah.
They will argue, even though they're losing, even though they could be like, they're cashing in their RRSPs or their retirement savings, they're selling property, they're selling their house, they're getting another job to pay for their multi-level marketing. They will, like over 99% of people will argue with you that it is a legitimate business. It's unreal.
Yeah, I think though, if you try to explain that to somebody, it's too far fetched. You sound like a conspiracy theorist. I think you're better off to just say, you know what, 99.7% of everyone who's joined this business has lost money. This is a documented fact. And no logical, sane person is going to join any form of business where there's a 99.7% loss rate. I mean, the odds are better at the casino. You're more likely to win money at the casino. Right. It's absolute madness.
Yeah. Benjamin had said a really good comment yesterday. It was like, logically, it makes sense. But if MLM has gotten to someone before, like, their parents are in Amway, they've been in Amway, they're raised with it, or they get to the kid like before they're 18, whoever gets to them first. Benjamin had said, what do you say to the kid, like the 10-year-old kid that says, yeah, but they're legal? Because that's already like the mind fuck of it all, where we'll say, well, if it was a pyramid scheme, if it was so bad, if it really was a 99% loss rate, these things wouldn't be legal.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're back to that same thing of saying, well, it's a political fix. It's like, how? Well, they pay off every politician. It doesn't matter what party you're on. It's like, it sounds absurd. It's however, I do feel hopeful about this and positive, because there's so many people that are starting to wake up, and people watching videos, listening to podcasts.
Here in Australia, in 1993, there was 128,000 Amway IBOs, and that was when we had a population in Australia of only 19.7 million. Today we've got about 27 million, and there's only 91,000 Amway IBOs. So Amway in Australia has been in decline for a long time. It's interesting. 93 was the peak of Amway here in Australia. It then went into decline. And then in about 2000 to 2001, they renamed it A2K. It then had a revival because people like myself were joining, and my father were joining, and we didn't know what it was. But then people figured out pretty quickly that A2K is Amway. And then, as they did with Quickstar, they went back to calling it Amway. And then it's just gone down in decline. So it's literally, if you look at the percentage of Australians in Amway, it's never been lower since the very, very early days.
I hope it continues that trend. I know it's like multi-level marketing seems to be on that downward trend. Sometimes there's like clips of like more in Canada, they just had this like pension plan, Ontario pension plan. They just purchased over 1.68 million shares in Herbalife though. So that's not good. But
yeah,
I think overall it's starting to decline. That's significant in Australia for it to decline that much. And how it's interesting how they had to, it's not a rebrand, they're hiding. They don't say who they are. So it's when you mentioned that you had joined and your dad had joined, but you didn't know what it is.
Actually, it wasn't just me and my dad. It was actually, have you heard it's on my channel, Paul Rakavalis and his wife, Karen Rakavalis.
No, I need to watch that.
She says that after a few months, she asked Paul, is this Amway? Does this have something to do with Amway? So that they were one of the top, these were like one of the top Amway couples in Australia. And she's saying that after months, she had no idea it was Amway. So that's how effective the A2K strategy was here, that people just didn't know what it was, because Amway had a really bad name here in Australia. It's interesting because when they arrived, they did a lot of advertising. I think they got to a point where Amway had such a bad name that they stopped all advertising, because they figured that the more we advertise, the more people are going to talk about us negatively. And this is a trend even today. When Amway enter a market, they advertise heavily, and then they stop all advertising after a period of time, because I think they think Imagine you've got 10 guys watching a sports game together, and Amway ad comes on. Inevitably, some of them is going to have a bad experience with Amway, or a family member or friend, and they're going to make a joke about Amway. So those ads then become a very negative thing. So they then almost, they go underground. So that was sort of where Amway was in the early 2000s. They were underground. And I guess they still are underground here. They don't advertise at all.
Why did they get a bad name in Australia?
Because so many people joined and lost money.
Yeah. So that was
almost everybody, know somebody who had a friend or a family member in Amway who told them, I'm going to become a multimillionaire in the next year. And then you saw him in a year's time, and they were still working their job, they're just over broke, and they were no longer in Amway. Literally everybody knew someone like that. So that's why they needed to rebrand. But yeah, there's very few people you would meet in Australia who doesn't have a friend or a family member who was. Well, I mean, that data proves it too. If you only got 19.7, well, I think it was 19.7 million people in Australia, and 128,000 Amway IBOs. That is, if Amway is a business, then Amway was the most common business in Australia by an absolute mile.
Yeah.
I mean, compare it with Subway. Subway, the most common franchise on the planet, 30,000. I think it's about 30,000 franchises for the whole world. Amway had 128,000 franchises
in Australia
alone. Yes.
Yeah.
with a bit over 19 million people. I mean, it was the most common business there was, and everybody who did it stopped doing it. But that was, actually in 01, when my dad and myself joined, they were just saying that this is just like McDonald's, just like Subway. It's a franchise.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it couldn't be any more different from a franchise.
Can you talk to us about like so you both got in? Did you decide to do this together, and then just talk about why you aren't still in it, or why your dad stayed, or your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, Dad actually joined in '94 for a period of time, and then he then quit. And it's interesting because he was a big critic of it in the sort of mid '90s. I remember him saying things to me like, "These guys on stage, they say that they're retired and they're only working part time, and then in the next line they say they're doing a speech in Melbourne on Friday night. They're in Melbourne. Saturday night they're in Sydney." He says, "What? But they're meant to be They're meant to be retired. It doesn't make any sense. They're meant to be working a couple hours a week. Yet they're flying all over Australia doing speech after speech after speech. It doesn't make sense." So he got it was a scam. And then for some reason he got back in. And I remember this very charismatic, dynamic guy sponsored him. And I remember him being at our house. And I remember this is the very, very first presentation. We had about 5 people over. And he said that all he did when he began was he bought products and they sent him a $50 check in the mail. And I'm sitting there going, hang on, you started at 3%. You did not get a $50 check in the mail. So that alerted me to there was a con. And then actually mine and Bad Dog Sports story is almost identical in that we joined and it was called, for him it was Quick Start, for me it was A2K. But the reason why we both quit was because we were hounded and pressured beyond belief to go to this expensive function. I remember it was a $235 function. And this sponsor, he was on me non-stop, just relentless. And at the time I was 18. So, $235 was a fair bit of money for an 18-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just this relentless pressure to go. And that he told me the story was that he was struggling, and then he went to this one function and it changed his whole life. His whole life changed because of this one amazing function. And I remember thinking, hang on, Dad's got all these tapes, which are just recorded functions. Why would you need to go there? If the information's that great, wouldn't listening to it on the tape be enough? Why would you have to go to a stadium and pay $235? So yeah, I quit because of that, literally. So I remember it wasn't until a couple of years after that I found out there was a 99% loss rate. And I was in disbelief. So even though I knew there was massive problems and flaws with this thing, I was surprised at just how bad it was.
Yeah.
So I mean, the tragedy of it is, if I had have known there was a 99% loss rate then, I never would have joined. Then I've got no doubt I would have been able to talk my dad out of joining as well. That's why the work that these anti-MLM YouTubers are doing is so important.
Yeah. It's about preventing people from getting into the first place. That's the thing, is just knowing that. And then knowing, having enough awareness and ability to critically think where you can put things together, where even your dad could see the contradictions in 94. Like, wait a second, you say we have all this time freedom, but then they're having to do this. This doesn't make sense. But then it's like presents itself at another time in his life, and it got him.
I'll tell you what it's similar to. When you join Scientology, they don't talk about spaceships and the crazy stuffs when you're joining. They talk logical, sensible stuff. That's what Amway do. When you're joining, they talk fairly logically and sensibly. And then as you get further into it, they then start to change the story. So when you join, it's save some money on your grocery bill, which is ridiculous nonsense, because the things you end up buying are things like supplements and energy drinks, not bread, milk, and